You think medieval nunneries were just quiet places where women prayed all day? What you're about to discover will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about medieval women and power. Picture the most successful female CEO you know. Now imagine her managing a business empire in 1300, when women supposedly had no rights, no education, and no power. Impossible? That's exactly what happened behind the walls of the medieval nunneries across Europe for over 800 years. And almost nobody talks about it. These weren't helpless women hiding from the world. They were running international trade networks that spanned from England to Constantinople. They were performing surgical procedures that wouldn't be attempted by university-trained male doctors for another 2 centuries. They were negotiating million-dollar contracts. Yes, in medieval terms, with kings, merchants, and popes. They owned more land than most nobles, controlled more wealth than entire cities, and wielded more political influence than the vast majority of men in their societies. While the outside world insisted women were too weak and stupid to handle money, these nuns were operating sophisticated banking systems. While society claimed women couldn't learn Latin, these communities were producing scholars whose theological writings influenced university curriculum across Europe. While the law insisted women needed male guardians to make any decisions, these abbesses were commanding respect from the most powerful men of their age. But here's the part that will really blow your mind. They weren't rebels or revolutionaries. They were working entirely within the system, using religious life as a legal loophole that allowed them to do everything medieval society said was impossible for women. They found a way to have careers, own property, get advanced education, exercise authority, and live independently, all while everyone around them insisted such things were against God's will. The numbers alone are staggering. By 1300, there were over 1,200 nunneries in England alone. Some of these communities controlled territories larger than entire counties. The Abbey of Fontevraud in France had authority over more than 50 other religious houses and owned land across 3 kingdoms. The German abbess Hildegard of Bingen was writing medical texts, composing symphonies, and advising emperors, while most university scholars had never heard of half the subjects she mastered. But perhaps most shocking of all, they kept it secret. Not intentionally, but because history was written by men who either didn't understand what these women were doing or didn't want to acknowledge it. For centuries, we've been told that medieval women lived lives of quiet submission, when in reality, tens of thousands of them were running some of the most successful and influential institutions in Europe. Whether you're listening from New York or London, Tokyo or Sydney, what you're about to hear will change how you see not just medieval history, but the entire story of women's achievement throughout time. These nuns discovered something that modern women are still fighting for: how to build institutions that allow female talent to flourish on its own terms. Before we dive into this hidden world, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I love hearing from our global community of history lovers who appreciate the stories that textbooks forgot to tell. This is the story about what really happened when medieval society's most intelligent, ambitious, and determined women decided to create their own world with their own rules behind walls that everyone thought were keeping them trapped, but were actually setting them free. The year is 1347, and you're a young woman from a noble family in northern France. Your father had just died in a hunting accident, leaving your family with mounting debts and no male heir to inherit the estate. Your mother faces an impossible choice: marry you off to a much older lord who could settle the family's financial troubles, or find another path that might preserve your dignity and provide you with education and security. The Black Death is spreading across Europe, trade routes are disrupting, and the old certainties of feudal life are crumbling around you. Your mother has heard whispers about the Abbey of St. Clair, nestled in the rolling hills just 2 days' ride from your family's crumbling manor. It's not the grim prison you might imagine. The abbess there, a woman named Margaret, was once married to a successful merchant before becoming a widow. She transformed the community into something remarkable, a place where women could own property, make important decisions, and pursue learning that was forbidden to them in the outside world. The Abbey has built up extensive libraries, run successful textile workshops, and provides medical care to the surrounding villages. As you approach the Abbey on horseback, the morning mist clings to the stone walls that rise from the hillside like something from a dream. The bells are calling for morning prayers, and their sound carries across the valley with a clarity that seems to cut through the uncertainty that has plagued your family for months. You can smell bread baking in the Abbey's ovens, carried on the wind along with the scent of herbs from their extensive gardens. These aren't the desperate, hollow-eyed women you might expect. Through the gates, you catch glimpses of nuns moving with purpose, their faces showing not defeat, but determination. The Abbey walls enclose not just a religious community, but an entire economic and social world. As you draw closer, you can see the smoke rising from workshops where skilled craftswomen create illuminated manuscripts that will be sold to wealthy patrons across Europe. You hear the sound of looms, where nuns weave cloth so fine it competes with the best textile centres in Flanders. Gardens stretch out in carefully planned rows, growing both food and medicinal herbs that support not just the community, but generate income through sales to nearby towns. Your escort, an elderly nun named Sister Agnes, meets you at the gates. Her eyes are bright with intelligence, and her handshake is firm from years of physical work. She doesn't speak with the meek whisper you expected, but with the confident voice of someone accustomed to making important decisions. As she leads you through the entrance, you realize you're about to enter a world that challenges everything you thought you knew about what it meant to be a woman in medieval Europe. The heavy wooden doors close behind you with a sound that echoes through the stone corridors, and you step into a reality that will reshape your understanding of power, community, and survival in the medieval world. The first thing that strikes you as you cross the threshold isn't silence, it's the hum of activity. The entrance hall buzz with purposeful movement as nuns hurry between different tasks, their woolen habits rustling against the stone floors. The air carries a mixture of scents that tell the story of a complex working community. Fresh bread from the bakery, the sharp tang of ink from the scriptorium, the earthy smell of herbs being dried for medicine, and the clean scent of soap made from the Abbey's own workshops. Sister Agnes leads you through corridors lined with colourful tapestries woven by the nuns themselves. The walls aren't the bare stone you expected, but are decorated with vibrant artwork that demonstrates both artistic skill and considerable wealth. Painted scenes from biblical stories mix with intricate geometric patterns, and you notice that many of the faces in the religious scenes look distinctly like the nuns you're beginning to encounter. These women haven't just copied traditional religious art. They've made it their own. The sound of your footsteps on the flagstone floors mingles with voices drifting from different parts of the complex. You hear laughter coming from what Sister Agnes explains is the workshop where younger nuns are learning to embroider altar cloths. From another direction comes the sound of concentrated discussion as more senior nuns debate the proper translation of a Latin text they're preparing for copying. The Abbey's scriptorium has earned a reputation for producing some of the most accurate and beautiful manuscript copies in the region, and scholars from universities as far away as Paris send requests for their work. As you pass through the cloister, the central courtyard that forms the heart of the Abbey's daily life, you see nuns engaged in activities that would be impossible for women in the outside world. A group of them are deep in conversation with a merchant who has travelled from London to negotiate a contract for the woolen cloth they produce. The abbess herself is reviewing account books with the same attention to detail that any successful business owner would give to their finances. Another nun is teaching a group of young girls from the surrounding villages to read and write. An education that will be completely unavailable to them anywhere else. The smells of the Abbey tell their own story about the complex economy that sustains this community. The aroma of various herbs signals the extensive medical practice that the nuns maintain, treating everything from broken bones to difficult childbirth for women throughout the region. The scent of different types of wood suggests the carpentry workshop where nuns craft furniture and decorative items for sale. Even the kitchens reveal surprises. The smell of spices that could only be afforded by a wealthy and well-connected community, suggesting trade networks that stretch across Europe and beyond. Your eyes begin to adjust to the different lighting throughout the complex, and you notice details that reveal the Abbey's surprising sophistication. Glass windows, still rare in most private homes, allow natural light to flood the scriptorium where nuns work on delicate illuminated manuscripts. The floors in the main halls are covered with woven rugs that demonstrate both artistic skill and practical comfort. Even the nuns' clothing, while simple in design, is made from high-quality wool, dyed in rich colors that speak to both artistic sensibility and economic success. The sounds of the Abbey create a constant backdrop that reveals the rhythm of a highly organized community. Bells mark not just prayer times, but work schedules, meal times, and the various activities that keep this complex operation running smoothly. You hear the scratch of quills on parchment from the scriptorium, the steady rhythm of looms from the textile workshops, and the gentle splash of water from the fountain in the cloister courtyard. Even the sound of voices carries a different quality than you expected. These women speak with authority and confidence. Their conversations filled with discussions of business, theology, art, and politics. As Sister Agnes continues your tour, you begin to understand that you're not entering a place of retreat from the world, but rather a different kind of engagement with it. The Abbey walls don't shut out medieval society. They create a space where women can participate in that society on their own terms, with their own power structures and their own definitions of success and achievement. The people you encounter as you move deeper into the Abbey challenge every assumption you might have held about medieval religious women. Sister Margaret, the librarian, greets you with ink-stained fingers and eyes bright with intellectual curiosity. She's been working on a translation of classical texts that will make ancient Greek philosophy accessible to scholars throughout Europe. Her Latin is flawless, her knowledge of multiple languages impressive, and her understanding of theology sophisticated enough to engage in debates with university-trained priests. In the textile workshop, you meet Catherine, a woman who entered the abbey as a widow with young children. The community not only welcomed her, but allowed her to bring her sons, who now work in the abbey's male-only areas, while being educated alongside the daughters of noble families. Catherine has become the workshop's master weaver, creating cloth so fine that it's sought after by wealthy merchants in Paris and London. Her hands move across the loom with the confidence of someone who has found both purpose and prosperity in her new life. The medical infirmary introduces you to Sister Anne, a woman whose knowledge of herbs and healing practices makes her more sought after than many university-trained physicians. She learned her skills from an older nun who had spent decades treating everything from plague victims to women experiencing difficult childbirth. Anne's patients include not just the abbey community, but women from villages many miles away who trust her expertise more than that of male doctors who often view women's bodies as mysterious and unknowable. Young Isabella, barely 16, represents the abbey's role as an educational institution. She came from a merchant family that recognized her quick mind and wanted to give her opportunities that would be impossible in the outside world. Under the guidance of the abbey's scholars, she's learning to read and write in Latin, French, and even some Greek. Her goal is to become a scribe, copying and illuminating the manuscripts that generate significant income for the abbey, while preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The abbey's economic manager, Sister Joan, handles financial matters with the skill of any successful business owner. She negotiates contracts with merchants, manages the abbey's extensive landholdings, and oversees the various workshops that generate income. Her ledgers show a complex network of trade relationships that span from local villages to international markets. She's also responsible for the abbey's charitable work, distributing food and medical care to poor families in the surrounding area. Each woman you meet has her own story of how she came to the abbey and what she has found there. Some fled arranged marriages to older men they found repugnant. Others came as widows, seeking security and community after losing their husbands. Many arrived as young girls whose families recognized that the abbey offered better education and more opportunities than traditional marriage could provide. A few came seeking escape from family violence or political troubles that made life in the outside world dangerous. What strikes you most is how these women talk about their choices and their lives. They don't speak as victims or as women who have settled for second-best options. Instead, they describe their lives with the satisfaction of people who have found meaningful work, supportive community, and the freedom to develop their talents and interests. They've created a world where women can own property, make important decisions, pursue learning, and exercise authority in ways that would be impossible in the male-dominated society beyond the abbey walls. The daily operations of the abbey reveal a level of organization and efficiency that challenges medieval society's assumptions about women's capabilities. The day begins before dawn with the ringing of bells that call the community to the first prayer service of the day. But prayer, while important, is just one part of a complex schedule that includes education, manufacturing, business management, and community service. The Abbey's educational programs serve multiple purposes. Young girls from noble families receive instruction in reading, writing, mathematics, and theology that prepares them either for life as nuns or for return to the outside world with skills that make them valuable marriage partners. The Abbey also educates the daughters of wealthy merchants, providing them with the literacy and numeracy skills they'll need to help manage family businesses. Some of these girls choose to remain as nuns, while others return to their families with knowledge that benefits their entire communities. The manufacturing operations generate significant income that supports the Abbey's charitable work and provides for the community's needs. The textile workshops produce everything from simple woolen cloth for local markets to intricate silk embroideries that decorate the altars of wealthy churches. The scriptorium creates not just religious texts, but also copies of classical literature, legal documents, and administrative records for wealthy patrons who recognize the Abbey's reputation for accuracy and beautiful craftsmanship. The Abbey's medical practice serves both the community and the surrounding region. The nuns' knowledge of herbal medicine, surgery, and childbirth assistance makes them essential healthcare providers in an age when professional medical care is rare and expensive. Their treatment of women's health issues, in particular, fills a crucial gap in medieval healthcare, as male physicians often refuse to treat conditions they consider improper to examine. Agricultural operations ensure the Abbey's food security while generating surplus crops for sale. The nuns manage extensive gardens that produce vegetables, herbs, and fruit, while also overseeing livestock that provides milk, eggs, and meat. Their agricultural techniques often surpass those used by local farmers, as the Abbey's literate nuns have access to classical texts on farming and can experiment with new methods. The business operations require skills that medieval society typically denied to women. The Abbey's financial managers negotiate contracts, manage investments, and oversee trade relationships that span across Europe. They maintain detailed records of income and expenses, plan for future needs, and make strategic decisions about how to expand the Abbey's economic base. Their success challenges the medieval assumption that women lack the intellectual capacity for complex business management. The Abbey's charitable work extends far beyond simple almsgiving. The nuns operate what amounts to a social services system for their region, providing food to hungry families, medical care to the sick, education to children whose parents can't afford tutors, and shelter to women fleeing dangerous situations. This charitable work is possible because of the Abbey's economic success, and represents a form of social responsibility that goes far beyond what most medieval institutions provided. The daily schedule balances religious obligations with practical work in ways that maximize both spiritual development and economic productivity. Morning prayers are followed by breakfast and then work assignments that vary by season and need. Some nuns spend their mornings in the scriptorium, others in the workshops, and still others in the gardens or managing business affairs. Afternoon prayers divide the day, followed by more work, study time, and evening prayers before bed. The darker complexities of Abbey life reveal themselves gradually as you spend more time within the walls. Not everything about this world is as idealistic as it first appears. The Abbey's success depends partly on its ability to navigate the complex and often dangerous political currents of medieval society. The abbess must maintain relationships with powerful lords, bishops, and merchants who could either protect or destroy the community, depending on their whims and interests. The Abbey's wealth makes it a target for those who would exploit or control it. Local lords sometimes attempt to install their own candidates as abbess, hoping to gain control of the Abbey's resources. Church officials may investigate the community's practices. looking for evidence of heresy or inappropriate behavior that could justify intervention. Even the abbey's success in business can create enemies among male merchants who resent competition from women. Within the abbey itself, the realities of human nature create tensions and conflicts that belie the idealistic vision of harmonious community life. The rigid hierarchy that places the abbess at the top and novices at the bottom can breed resentment and competition. Younger nuns may chafe under the authority of older women, while older nuns may resist changes proposed by newcomers. Personal rivalries develop over work assignments, living arrangements, and the abbess's favor. The abbey's economic success depends on maintaining relationships with the outside world that sometimes compromise its religious ideals. The need to sell products in competitive markets may lead to business practices that prioritize profit over spiritual values. The requirement to maintain good relationships with wealthy patrons may force the abbey to overlook or even support political and social practices that conflict with Christian teachings about justice and compassion. The physical demands of abbey life take their toll on women's health and well-being. The combination of frequent prayer services, physical labor, and inadequate nutrition during times of economic hardship can lead to exhaustion and illness. The abbey's medical facilities, while advanced for their time, can't address all health problems. And some nuns suffer from chronic conditions that make their daily lives difficult. The emotional and psychological challenges of abbey life are significant. Women who enter the abbey young may later regret their choice, but find themselves unable to leave due to family pressure, economic necessity, or church law. The isolation from family and friends in the outside world can lead to depression and loneliness. The constant oversight and regulation of personal behavior can feel oppressive to women who value independence and privacy. The abbey's charitable work, while admirable, sometimes enables the very social problems it seeks to address. By providing food and medical care to the poor, the abbey may allow local lords to neglect their responsibilities to their tenants. By educating the daughters of wealthy families, the abbey may perpetuate class distinctions that keep most women in poverty and ignorance. Violence, while rare, is not entirely absent from abbey life. Disputes between nuns can escalate to physical confrontations, particularly when they involve women from different social classes who bring their outside prejudices into the community. The abbey's wealth and isolation also make it vulnerable to attacks by bandits or soldiers who view the community as an easy target for theft or worse. The abbey's economic networks stretch far beyond its immediate surroundings, connecting it to trade routes that span from the Mediterranean to the Baltic Sea. The fine textiles produced in the abbey's workshops are sold to merchants who carry them to markets in Paris, London, and even as far as Constantinople. The illuminated manuscripts created in the scriptorium are commissioned by wealthy patrons throughout Europe who recognize the abbey's reputation for artistic excellence and scholarly accuracy. The abbey's reputation as a center of learning attracts scholars and students from across the continent. University-trained priests come to consult the abbey's extensive library, which contains not just religious texts, but also works of classical literature, natural philosophy, and medical knowledge. The abbey's scholars engage in correspondence with intellectual figures throughout Europe, participating in debates about theology, philosophy, and science that shape medieval thought. The abbey's agricultural innovations influence farming practices throughout the region. The nuns' experiments with crop rotation, selective breeding of livestock, and irrigation techniques often produce superior results that neighbouring farmers attempt to copy. The abbey's success in producing surplus crops for sale encourages other communities to adopt similar methods, gradually improving agricultural productivity throughout the area. The abbey's medical practices create a network of healthcare knowledge that extends across multiple communities. Nuns trained in the abbey's infirmary often establish medical practices in other religious communities, or return to their families with knowledge that benefits their entire regions. The abbey's reputation for successful treatment of women's health issues attracts patients from great distances and establishes relationships with other medical practitioners. The abbey's financial success enables it to make strategic investments that strengthen its economic position while supporting other communities. The abbey lends money to merchants and landowners, invests in trade ventures, and purchases property that expands its economic base. These investments create relationships with powerful figures who have incentives to protect the abbey's interests. The abbey's charitable work creates a network of social support that extends throughout the region. The food distributed to poor families, the medical care provided to the sick, and the education offered to children from humble backgrounds create relationships of gratitude and loyalty that protect the abbey during times of political uncertainty. Local communities have strong incentives to defend the abbey against external threats because of the essential services it provides. The abbey's role as a safe haven for women fleeing dangerous situations connects it to informal networks of communication and support that operate throughout medieval society. Women who know they can find shelter at the abbey pass this information to others who might need it, creating a form of social service that operates outside official channels. This role sometimes puts the abbey at odds with male authorities who view women's independence as threatening to establish social order. The cultural and intellectual contributions of the abbey create ripple effects that extend far beyond its immediate community. The books copied in the scriptorium preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost, while the original works created by the abbey's scholars add to the intellectual heritage of medieval Europe. The abbey's reputation as a center of learning attracts talented women who might otherwise have no opportunity to develop their intellectual abilities. The abbey's influence on artistic and cultural development extends throughout the region and beyond. The illuminated manuscripts, embroidered textiles, and other decorative arts created by the nuns establish aesthetic standards that influence other artists and craftspeople. The abbey's patronage of music and literature supports cultural development in ways that benefit the entire community. The abbey's educational programs create a network of literate women who carry their knowledge back to their families and communities. These women serve as informal teachers, passing on reading and writing skills to their children and neighbours. They also serve as intermediaries between the literate and illiterate worlds, helping to translate written documents and communicate with officials who conduct business in Latin. The abbey's economic success demonstrates women's capabilities in ways that challenge medieval assumptions about gender roles. The sight of nuns successfully managing complex business operations, negotiating profitable contracts, and building wealth through their own efforts provides evidence that women can excel in areas traditionally reserved for men. This example influences attitudes about women's capabilities and creates pressure for expanding women's opportunities in other contexts. The seasonal rhythms of abbey life reflect the agricultural cycles that dominate medieval society. But they also reveal the complex ways that religious, economic, and social pressures shape daily experience. Spring brings not just the renewal of agricultural work, but also the planning for the year's economic activities. The abbess and her advisors must decide which crops to plant, which products to emphasize in the workshops, and how to allocate resources between different projects. Summer is the busiest time for the abbey's agricultural operations, but it's also when the workshops produce their most ambitious projects. The longer days allow for extended work on illuminated manuscripts, and the warm weather makes it easier to work with dyes and other materials that require specific temperature conditions. Summer also brings an influx of visitors, including merchants negotiating contracts, scholars consulting the library, and pilgrims seeking the abbey's spiritual guidance. Autumn brings the harvest season, which determines the abbey's food security for the coming year. The nuns' agricultural expertise becomes crucial as they work to maximize yields and preserve food for winter storage. Autumn is also when the abbey's charitable work becomes most visible, as surplus crops are distributed to needy families preparing for winter. The workshops shift their focus to producing items needed for the cold months ahead. Winter creates different challenges and opportunities. The shorter days limit some types of work, but the cold months are ideal for projects that require careful attention to detail. The scriptorium reaches peak productivity during winter, as the nuns have more time for the patient work of copying and illuminating manuscripts. Winter is also when the abbey's medical services become most crucial, as cold weather brings increased illness and injury. Religious holidays create their own rhythms within the abbey's yearly cycle. Major festivals like Easter and Christmas require extensive preparation, including the creation of special liturgical items, the decoration of the chapel, and the preparation of feast foods. These celebrations also provide opportunities for the abbey to demonstrate its wealth and cultural sophistication to visiting dignitaries and important patrons. The abbey's relationship with secular authorities creates additional seasonal pressures. Tax collection periods require careful preparation of financial records and negotiation with officials who may be hostile to the abbey's independence. Political changes, such as the death of a lord or the outbreak of war, can suddenly alter the abbey's situation and require rapid adaptation. The day realities of managing the abbey reveal the extraordinary administrative skills required of the abbess and her senior advisors. The abbess must balance the competing demands of spiritual leadership, business management, and political diplomacy, while maintaining the delicate relationships that ensure the abbey's survival and prosperity. Her day begins before dawn with private prayers and continues through a complex schedule of meetings, inspections, and decisions that affect every aspect of community life. The abbey's internal economy requires constant attention and adjustment. The abbess must monitor the productivity of different workshops, assess the quality of products being produced, and make strategic decisions about resource allocation. She must also oversee the abbey's finances, ensuring that income from various sources is properly recorded and that expenses are controlled without compromising the community's ability to fulfill its religious and charitable obligations. The political dimensions of abbey leadership are particularly challenging. The abbess must maintain relationships with church officials who have the power to interfere in abbey affairs, secular lords who control the surrounding territory, and wealthy patrons whose support is essential for the abbey's continued prosperity. These relationships require diplomatic skills and political acumen that few women in medieval society have the opportunity to develop. The abbess's role as spiritual leader requires different but equally demanding skills. She must provide guidance and counsel to women facing personal crises, resolve conflicts between community members, and ensure that the abbey's religious practices maintain the standards expected by church authorities. Her theological knowledge must be sophisticated enough to engage with educated clergy while remaining accessible to nuns with limited formal education. The physical demands of abbey leadership are significant. The abbess must be present for all major religious services, participate in manual labor alongside the community, and maintain the energy needed for long days of administrative work. Her health and well-being directly affect the abbey's ability to function effectively, making personal care a matter of community concern. The emotional and psychological challenges of abbey leadership are perhaps the most difficult aspects of the role. The abbess must make decisions that affect women's lives profoundly, sometimes choosing between competing needs and values. She must maintain authority while remaining compassionate, enforce discipline while preserving community harmony, and balance the abbey's religious mission with its practical necessities. The universal truths revealed by life within the abbey walls speak to fundamental aspects of human nature that transcend historical periods and cultural differences. The women who found refuge, purpose, and community within these walls were responding to needs that remain constant across time. The need for security, the desire for meaningful work, the hunger for knowledge and learning, and the longing for community and belonging. The abbey's success in creating space for women to exercise authority and develop their capabilities demonstrates a universal human potential that emerges when artificial barriers are removed. The nuns who managed complex business operations, produced magnificent art, and advanced human knowledge were not exceptional individuals, but ordinary women who had been given extraordinary opportunities. Their achievements suggest that the limitations placed on women in medieval society were social constructions rather than natural boundaries. The challenges faced by the abbey community reveal the universal difficulties of creating and maintaining human communities. The conflicts between individual desires and collective needs, the tensions between idealistic goals and practical necessities, and the ongoing struggle to balance competing values are issues that face every human community, regardless of its historical context or cultural setting. The abbey's role as a refuge for women fleeing dangerous or oppressive situations highlights the universal need for alternatives to conventional social arrangements. Throughout history, human societies have needed institutions that provide shelter for those who cannot or will not conform to dominant social patterns. The abbey's function as such an institution demonstrates both the necessity and the possibility of creating such alternatives. The spiritual dimension of abbey life addresses universal human needs for meaning, purpose, and connection to something greater than individual existence. While the specific religious framework of medieval Christianity may seem foreign to modern sensibilities, the underlying human needs it addressed remain constant. The abbey's success in creating a community centered on shared values and common purpose offers insights into how human beings can create meaningful lives together. The abbey's economic achievements demonstrate universal principles of human cooperation and organization. The nuns' ability to create wealth through collaborative effort, to manage complex enterprises through careful planning and execution, and to balance profit with social responsibility offers timeless lessons about human potential and community organization. The educational and cultural contributions of the Abbey reveal the universal human capacity for creativity, learning, and intellectual growth. The nuns' preservation of knowledge, creation of new works of art and literature, and advancement of human understanding in fields ranging from medicine to theology demonstrate that human creativity flourishes when given proper support and encouragement. The Abbey's charitable work embodies universal human values of compassion, generosity, and social responsibility. The nuns' commitment to serving the poor, caring for the sick, and providing education to those who could not otherwise afford. It demonstrates that human communities can organize themselves around principles of mutual aid and collective well-being. As the evening shadows lengthen across the Abbey's stone walls and the bells call the community to vespers, the timeless rhythm of this remarkable institution continues its ancient pattern. The women who found their way to these walls, whether driven by religious calling, economic necessity, or the simple desire for a life of dignity and purpose, created something that transcends the particular circumstances of their medieval world. In the quiet reflection of this moment, as the last light of day filters through the Abbey's windows and illuminates the faces of women at prayer, we see reflected the enduring human capacity to create meaning, community, and beauty, even in the midst of difficulty and uncertainty. The Abbey walls that once seemed to separate these women from the world actually created space for them to engage with that world more fully, more creatively, and more powerfully than conventional society would have allowed. The legacy of these medieval women extends far beyond their own time and place. Their example of female leadership, intellectual achievement, and economic success challenge the assumptions of their age and continues to inspire those who seek to create more equitable and just societies. Their demonstration that women could excel in areas traditionally reserved for men helped to expand human understanding of what was possible and what was necessary for human flourishing. The Abbey's success in balancing spiritual values with practical necessities offers timeless wisdom about how human communities can organize themselves around shared purposes while remaining responsive to changing circumstances. The nuns' ability to maintain their religious commitments while adapting to economic and political realities demonstrates that principled living does not require withdrawal from the world, but rather thoughtful engagement with it. The knowledge preserved and created within these walls, the artistic beauty produced by skilled hands, and the charitable work that eased human suffering all represent investments in human dignity and potential that continue to pay dividends across the centuries. The Abbey's commitment to education, healthcare, and social service established models of community responsibility that influence the development of later institutions and continue to shape our understanding of what communities owe to their members. The personal stories of courage, determination, and hope that unfolded within the Abbey walls remind us that individual human beings, when given the opportunity and support, can achieve remarkable things. The abbesses who led with wisdom and skill, the scholars who advanced human knowledge, the artists who created beauty, and the caregivers who eased suffering, all demonstrate that human potential flourishes when nurtured by supportive communities. As we reflect on what really happened inside these medieval nunneries, we discover not just a historical curiosity, but a testament to the enduring human capacity for creating meaning, beauty, and community. The abbey walls that once sheltered these remarkable women have long since crumbled, but the example they set continues to inspire and guide those who seek to build more just, more compassionate, and more fully human communities. The bells that once called these women to prayer have fallen silent, but their echo continues to resonate in the lives of all who recognize that human dignity, community, and purpose are not historical accidents, but ongoing human possibilities that require constant cultivation and protection. In understanding what really happened inside these medieval nunneries, we gain insight not just into the past, but into the enduring potential of human communities to create spaces where every person can flourish and contribute to the common good. If you enjoyed this journey through history and found yourself drifting peacefully into the medieval world of these remarkable women, please consider subscribing to our channel. We explore the hidden stories behind history's most fascinating places, bringing you the sights, sounds, and experiences that made our ancestors human, just like us. Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining us in discovering what really happened inside medieval nunneries.